So, it's 1555. The most powerful man in Europe, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, decides he's had enough. He's tired of the wars, the gout, the sheer administrative headache of ruling half the known world. His solution is to split his empire and hand the Netherlands, all 17 provinces of it, over to his son Philip II of Spain. This was less of a gift and more of a geopolitical migraine waiting to happen. Philip was Spanish, devoutly Catholic, and viewed the famously independent, commercially minded Dutch about as warmly as one might view a strange fungus growing on the palace walls. He inherited a region that was wealthy, stubborn, and increasingly Protestant. Nothing could possibly go wrong with a micromanager from Madrid trying to run this place. The Dutch had some new ideas about religion, which mostly involved not being Catholic anymore. Philip's response was, predictably, to tighten the screws with the Inquisition. This culminated in the Belden Storm of 1566, or the Iconoclastic Fury. This wasn't a polite debate. It was a wave of Calvinists storming into Catholic churches and smashing statues, altarpieces, and anything they deemed idolatrous. Think of it as extreme minimalist redecorating, but with more righteous fury and less input from the owners. Philip, hearing the news in his stone palace in Spain, did not take it well. His response was to send in the troops, because when people are upset about your policies, the best solution is always to send an army to make them even more upset. To handle this PR crisis, Philip sent his top general, the Duke of Alba, a man who thought diplomacy was something other people did. Alba arrived in 1567 with 10,000 veteran Spanish soldiers, which is the 16th century equivalent of calling in the HR department, if HR's primary tools were pikes and muskets. He immediately established the Council of Troubles to restore order. The locals, in a stunning display of accuracy, nicknamed it the Council of Blood. Its job was to prosecute anyone involved in the recent unpleasantness. In its first year, it sentenced over 1,000 people to death, often without the accused even being present. It was a masterclass in efficiency, if your goal is to be historically remembered as a monster. This is where William of Orange, also known as William the Silent, decides he's not going to be silent anymore. He was one of the richest noblemen in the Netherlands, and after Alba executed some of his friends and confiscated his lands, he figured rebellion was a solid career move. His first few attempts at invading were, to put it mildly, a disaster. His mercenary armies kept dissolving because he couldn't pay them. It turns out that starting a revolution is expensive. But he was persistent, issuing propaganda that painted Alba as a foreign tyrant, which wasn't exactly a hard sell at that point. He was playing the long game, even if the short game involved a lot of losing. The rebellion really kicked off thanks to a group called the Sea Beggars. These were pirates, essentially, Protestant exiles and assorted malcontents who got letters of marque from William of Orange to go harass Spanish shipping. In 1572, they were kicked out of their English ports and, caught in a storm, they decided to take shelter in the Dutch port of Brill. Upon arrival, they realized the Spanish garrison was conveniently absent, so they captured the town. This accidental victory sparked a chain reaction, with city after city in Holland and Zeeland suddenly declaring for the rebels. The Dutch Revolt was started not by a grand plan, but by some salty mariners who needed a place to park their boats. What followed was decades of the most grinding, brutal siege warfare imaginable. The Spanish would surround a city, and the city would starve. At the Siege of Haarlem, the defenders held out for 7 months. They were so hungry they were eating leather and grass. When they finally surrendered, the Spanish, true to form, executed the entire 2,000-man garrison. A few years later, at Leiden, the situation was even worse. The city was on the brink of cannibalism when William of Orange came up with a truly desperate idea: intentionally break the dikes and flood the entire countryside to wash the Spanish away. It worked. The besieging army literally floated away on the new inland sea. By 1576, Spain was basically bankrupt. Waging a global war is not cheap. This created a small problem. The Spanish army in the Netherlands hadn't been paid. For months. Unpaid, angry, professional soldiers are not a stable workforce. They decided to get their back pay by looting the city of Antwerp, the financial heart of the region. What followed was the Spanish Fury. For 3 days, the soldiers murdered, burned, and looted their way through the city, killing some 7,000 civilians. They destroyed the very economic engine they were supposed to be protecting. It was an act of such self-defeating brutality that it managed to unite all 17 provinces, Protestant and Catholic, against Spain, a truly phenomenal own goal. The shock of the Spanish Fury led to the pacification of Ghent. For a moment, it seemed like peace was possible. All 17 provinces agreed to unite, demand the Spanish troops leave, and sort out their religious differences later. It was a beautiful, fleeting moment of solidarity. Of course, sorting out religious differences later is historian speak for let's get back to fighting each other as soon as the common enemy is gone. Radical Calvinists in some cities started persecuting Catholics, and the southern, more aristocratic Catholic nobles started getting nervous. This brief alliance, born from a shared trauma, was about to fall apart over the same old arguments. And so, the Great Divorce began. In 1579, the southern provinces, spooked by the Protestants, formed the Union of Arras and reaffirmed their loyalty to Philip II. They basically said, we'd rather be ruled by a distant Spanish tyrant than our crazy neighbors. These provinces would eventually become Belgium. In response, the northern provinces, led by Holland, formed the Union of Utrecht, creating a formal alliance to fight Spain to the bitter end. This was the de facto declaration of independence for what would become the Netherlands. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the battle lines were now permanently drawn. The 80 Years' War was now 2 separate countries yelling at each other across a trench. The next several decades just kept going. Philip II put a bounty on William of Orange, who was assassinated in 1584. The Spanish sent a massive armada to crush England for helping the Dutch, and it famously failed. The Dutch, meanwhile, got really good at making money. They created the Dutch East India Company, essentially a multinational corporation with its own army and navy, and became the world's dominant economic power while still technically being at war. The fighting devolved into a long, expensive stalemate. It was a war that outlived its original participants. Philip II died, Elizabeth I died, the original rebels died, but the war just ground on, powered by pure, multi-generational stubbornness. Finally, in 1648, with all of Europe exhausted by the even bigger 30 Years' War, everyone sat down and signed the Peace of Munster. Spain formally recognized the Dutch Republic as an independent nation. After 80 years of fighting, billions in treasure, and hundreds of thousands of lives lost. The Netherlands was free, but divided. Spain was financially ruined and on its way to becoming a second-rate power. The southern Netherlands were devastated. What started as a protest over taxes and religion turned into a multi-generational bloodbath that fundamentally reshaped Europe. It's a fantastic lesson in how religious intolerance, political inflexibility, and a complete inability to just talk things out can lead to a conflict so long and pointless that everyone forgets why they started fighting in the first place. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!